The city of Vera was unlike any other place in the galaxy. Its towers rose like shining mountains of glass, reflecting the colors of the twin suns. Each building looked alive, as if it had grown from the ground instead of being built by hands. Among those towers stood the grand mansion of Lady Anura. Her home was larger than most of the palaces owned by the ruling council. Walls of crystal stretched high, glowing in the light of the suns, and servants moved quietly through the halls as if they were part of the building itself. Lady Anura was one of the richest beings on Vera. Her family had traded in rare minerals for generations, and her ships traveled to distant worlds, bringing wealth back to her city. She was known for her fine gowns made of shining threads and her voice that commanded respect in every gathering. Many envied her life. Yet those who looked closer would notice a shadow behind her eyes. The shadow was her daughter, Lyra. Lyra was gentle and quiet. She loved to sit in the gardens that surrounded the mansion. The gardens were filled with silver-leafed trees and flowers that glowed faintly during the night. While her mother entertained guests or spoke of new deals, Lyra often sat alone, touching the petals of the glowing flowers. She was kind to every servant and often thanked them, even when her mother thought such words were unnecessary. But kindness could not cover her sorrow. From the time she was young, Lyra had been told that she would never bear children. The healers of Vera had studied her body with their most advanced tools and declared her infertile. The verdict was final, and no one questioned it. In a society where family lines and heirs meant everything, this truth was heavy. For Lady Anura, it was not only sorrow but also shame. She wanted her daughter to continue their line, to keep the family name alive through the ages. But fate had closed that door. Lady Anura never spoke harshly of her daughter, yet her silence was often louder than any words. At grand dinners she spoke of business, trade, and politics, but she rarely introduced Lyra to others. She dressed her daughter in beautiful gowns but never let her speak much in public. Deep inside, she loved her child, but pride and disappointment battled within her heart. One evening, the city glowed brighter than usual. The twin suns had set, and the sky shimmered with lines of colored light from distant stars. The mansion was preparing for a gathering. Lady Anura had invited leaders from other towers to display her wealth and power. The servants hurried through the halls, carrying trays of shining crystal fruits and cups filled with golden drinks. Musicians prepared their instruments that created songs from waves of energy instead of strings. Lyra sat in her room, watching the glow of the city through her tall window. She wore a silver dress chosen by her mother, yet her heart felt heavy. She knew her mother would ask her to stand by her side during the gathering, not as a daughter with her own worth, but as a figure of decoration. Lyra wished for something more, something beyond the crystal walls. She wanted to see the stars up close, not just through windows. She wanted to hear voices that spoke of new worlds, not of wealth and trade. While she sat lost in thought, a servant named Rana entered quietly. Rana had served the family since before Lyra was born. She smiled warmly and said that guests from far places were already arriving. Among them, she whispered, was a human from the planet Earth. Lyra turned her head with surprise. Few humans ever came to Vera, for they were considered simple by the Veran elite. The people of Vera thought of themselves as advanced, while humans were seen as young and fragile. Still, Lyra's heart stirred with curiosity. She had read about humans in books. They were said to be bold, full of stories, and unafraid of struggle. When the gathering began, the great hall of the mansion filled with light. Guests wore garments that glowed in shifting colors. They spoke in elegant voices and laughed as if nothing in the world could trouble them. Lady Anura moved among them with grace, her gown shimmering like liquid crystal. She greeted every leader with charm and accepted every compliment with pride. Beside her stood Lyra, quiet as always, her eyes lowered though her mind wandered. It was then that she saw him. The human was not dressed in glowing silk or crystal. He wore simple clothing that looked plain compared to the others, but his presence was steady. His name was Tomasz, a researcher who had come to study the medicines of Vera. While most guests bowed deeply before Lady Anura, Tomasz only gave a respectful nod. His eyes did not wander to her wealth or her jewels. Instead, he noticed the hall itself, the music, the people, and at last his gaze rested on Lyra. Their eyes met for only a moment, yet Lyra felt something stir in her chest. Tomasz did not look at her with pity or pride. He looked at her as if she mattered, as if she was not hidden behind her mother's shadow. The evening continued with speeches and music, yet Lyra's mind kept returning to that single glance. For the first time in many years, she felt seen. She did not know why this mattered so much, but the feeling warmed her heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. As the gathering ended and the guests began to leave, Lady Anura smiled with pride at the success of her evening. She had once again shown her power and her wealth. Yet she did not notice the small spark that had been lit within her daughter's heart. She did not hear the quiet voice inside Lyra whispering that life could be more than what had been given, that perhaps fate was not as final as it seemed. In the shining mansion of crystal towers, under the twin suns of Vera, a story was beginning. A story that would shake the pride of the rich and bring new hope to the hopeless. And though no one could see it yet, the first step of that story had already been taken. The morning after the gathering, the mansion of Lady Anura was quieter than usual. Servants moved slowly through the halls, cleaning away the last signs of the celebration. The crystal floors still held the reflection of the glowing lamps that had filled the night with brilliance. For Lady Anura, the evening had been a success. Leaders from other towers had praised her wealth and her house. She believed her status among the elite had grown even stronger. Lyra, however, remembered the night differently. She cared little for the laughter or the display of jewels. What stayed with her was the look of the human, Tomasz. He had not spoken to her, yet the calm and honest way his eyes had met hers was unlike anything she had ever known. It was not the gaze of someone judging her value or measuring her against her mother. It was simply a look that said she was seen. Later that day, as the suns reached their height, Tomasz returned to the mansion. He had been invited by Lady Anura herself, who wanted to show him the healing halls of Vera. She was proud of her world's medicine and technology. She believed that when he saw the power of Veran knowledge, he would spread tales of their greatness back to earth. When he entered the mansion, he bowed politely, though not deeply, and thanked Lady Anura for her invitation. His voice was calm, his words simple. Lyra stood nearby, silent as always, her silver gown replaced with a plain dress more suited for the day. Tomasz noticed her but did not stare. He offered her a small nod as if to say he remembered her presence from the night before. Lyra felt a spark of warmth at that small gesture. Lady Anura led Tomasz through the halls. She showed him chambers where healers worked with glowing instruments that could scan bodies and repair broken bones. She explained how diseases were removed from the blood using energy fields. She spoke with pride, raising her voice slightly each time Tomasz asked a question. She wanted him to be impressed. Yet Tomasz did not react with awe. He listened carefully, asked about the methods, and sometimes tilted his head in thought. He praised the healer's work but did not speak as if he had seen something beyond imagination. Lady Anura grew curious about his calmness. She asked if human medicine was already equal to theirs. Tomasz smiled gently and answered that human medicine was different. On Earth, doctors often had to work with fewer tools, but they relied on creativity and persistence. He explained that humans were skilled at finding solutions when faced with limits. They did not always have perfect machines, but they learned to adapt. Lady Anura raised her brow at this, for to her ears it sounded both humble and strange. To her, true power meant never facing limits. As they spoke, Lyra followed quietly. She listened more closely to Tomasz than she had to many others who had passed through the mansion. There was no arrogance in his tone. Instead, there was honesty, a steady confidence that did not need loud words or flashing wealth. She found herself wanting to hear more. When they reached the healing garden, Tomasz paused. This place was one of Lyra's favorite spaces. Here, vines with glowing fruits hung low, and small fountains filled the air with soft sounds. He looked around with wonder, not at the luxury but at the beauty of the plants. He bent down to touch the leaves, then asked Lyra, who stood nearby, if she often walked here. At first Lyra hesitated. She was not used to being spoken to by guests. Most only addressed her mother. But Tomasz waited with patience, and finally she nodded. She told him softly that she liked the garden at night when the flowers glowed brightest. Tomasz smiled. He said that on Earth, some flowers opened only under the moon, and people believed they carried secrets in their petals. Lyra's eyes widened, for she had never heard such a story. The idea of flowers holding secrets felt like a poem, not science, yet it filled her heart with quiet joy. Lady Anura noticed the small exchange. She did not speak of it, but inside she felt a stir of unease. She wanted the human to admire her knowledge, not her daughter's words. She guided the tour back to herself, speaking again of the greatness of Veyron medicine. When Tomasz finally prepared to leave, he thanked Lady Anura with courtesy. Then he turned to Lyra and said he hoped she would continue to enjoy the garden. His words were simple, yet they carried more kindness than many of the long speeches she had heard from others. That evening, as the sun set and the towers of the city glowed in shades of red and gold, Lyra sat once more by her window. Her thoughts returned to Tomasz. She thought of the way he had listened to her few words, the way he had spoken about flowers on Earth. For the first time in a long while, she wished to speak more, to ask questions, to know what life was like on a world beyond the towers of Veyron. In the grand hall below, Lady Anura sat in her chamber, pleased with the day. She believed she had shown the human the greatness of her people. Yet in her pride she did not see what was quietly forming. A bond had begun, not through wealth or medicine, but through simple words shared in a garden. As the stars appeared above the crystal city, Lyra whispered to herself that the human was different. She did not know why she felt drawn to him, only that his presence had brought a light she had not felt in many years. A path was opening before her, though she could not yet see where it would lead. The days after Tomasz's visit passed quietly in the mansion of Lady Anura. The servants returned to their routines, polishing crystal floors and tending to the glowing gardens. Lady Anura herself stayed busy with meetings and messages from the Trade Council. Yet in the heart of the mansion, something new was quietly growing. Lyra could not forget the way Tomasz had spoken to her. His words had been simple, but they carried weight. No one had ever spoken to her in that way before, as if her thoughts mattered. In her life she had been treated as delicate, almost invisible. To her mother, she was both precious and disappointing, the last heir yet unable to continue the line. To the servants, she was kind but distant. To Tomasz, she had been simply herself. One afternoon, while walking in the healing garden, Lyra saw Tomasz again. He had returned to study more of Veyran medicine, and Lady Anura had allowed him entry. This time he was not with her mother but with one of the healers. He stood by a fountain, asking careful questions about the energy tools used for repairing bones. The healer explained with pride, but Tomasz's curiosity was more than polite listening. He took notes, compared methods, and suggested possibilities that even the healer had not considered. Lyra watched from a distance at first, hidden by the silver trees. She admired how calm he looked. When the healer left, Tomasz noticed her standing quietly nearby. He gave her the same small nod as before, and again she felt that spark in her chest. She stepped forward and greeted him softly. Tomasz smiled and said he had been hoping to see her in the garden again. Lyra hesitated, but then she asked what Earth's gardens looked like. His face lit up as he described them. He spoke of forests where tall green trees grew so thick that little light reached the ground. He spoke of rivers that carried the sound of rushing water across valleys. He told her of fields filled with flowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. Lyra listened with wide eyes. Veyra was beautiful, but its beauty was polished, shaped by design. The gardens of Earth, as Tomasz described, sounded wild and alive. She could almost picture the wind carrying the scent of flowers she had never known. For the first time, she wished she could walk beyond her own world. Tomasz noticed her silence and asked if she had ever traveled to other planets. Lyra shook her head. Her mother had always kept her within the safety of Veyra, away from the eyes of strangers. Tomasz did not press her with questions. Instead, he told her that humans often believed the unknown was a chance to learn. He said that fear was real, but so was curiosity, and curiosity could be stronger if one let it grow. His words touched her deeply. She felt as if he was speaking not only of stars and worlds but also of herself. For many years she had been told what she could not do. Now someone was reminding her of what might still be possible. Their meetings became more frequent. Whenever Tomasz visited the mansion, he would spend a few moments in the garden if he could. Sometimes they spoke of simple things, like favorite foods or the colors of skies on their worlds. Other times their words reached deeper. Tomasz told her that humans often face sickness and weakness, but they fought through it, finding ways to survive. He said their bodies might seem fragile compared to Veyran's, but their spirits were strong. Lyra was fascinated. She had always believed strength was measured in crystal towers, wealth, and perfect health. Now she began to see strength in a new way. She began to wonder if her life was not as limited as she had thought. One evening, as the suns dipped low and the city turned gold and violet, Tomasz shared a story. He told Lyra about a human village that had once been struck by a great storm. The homes were broken, crops were ruined, and many people feared they would starve. Yet the villagers came together. They rebuilt the homes with their own hands, they shared food, and they found new ways to grow crops even in poor soil. What seemed impossible at first became a victory because the people did not give up. Lyra's heart beat faster as she listened. She asked him why humans kept trying even when the world seemed against them. Tomasz thought for a moment and said that perhaps it was because humans did not believe in final endings. Even in their darkest hours, they believed there was always a path forward. Those words stayed with her long after he had left. She sat by her window that night, gazing at the stars. For the first time, she wondered if her own future was not as final as the healers had said. She remembered the cold voices that had told her she would never bring life into the world. But if humans could find hope in hopelessness, perhaps she too could carry such hope. Lady Anura, however, was less pleased. She had begun to notice the time Tomasz spent near her daughter. To her, he was still only a guest, a human who should admire the glory of Vera. She saw no value in his simple ways or his quiet words. When she watched Lyra smile while speaking with him, she felt a sting of unease. It was not anger yet, but something close to fear. She feared losing control of the one part of her life she guarded most. Still, she said nothing. She believed her daughter was too shy, too quiet, to form bonds that could change anything. She told herself that Tomasz would return to Earth soon enough, and life would return to normal. But life was already changing. In the secret corners of the garden, beneath the silver trees and glowing flowers, seeds of wonder had been planted. They were not seeds of wealth or power but of hope. Lyra carried them now in her heart, fragile yet growing. She could not yet see what they would become, but she felt their presence each time she remembered Tomasz's voice. The city of crystal towers glowed as it always had, but to Lyra, the light now looked different. The towers seemed less like prisons and more like stepping stones to something greater. She was beginning to believe that her life was not defined by what she lacked, but by what she could still discover. And though neither she nor Tomasz could know it yet, these seeds of wonder would grow into something that would shake the very foundations of Vera itself. The mansion of Lady Anura stood bright under the twin suns of Vera. From the outside, it looked the same as always, tall and proud, its crystal walls reflecting the light across the city. But inside, something new was happening. Something no one could explain. Lyra had begun to feel changes within herself. At first, they were small. She grew tired more quickly than usual. She felt waves of warmth across her body and sometimes woke in the morning with a strange flutter in her heart. She thought it was nothing more than her imagination, perhaps caused by her many walks in the garden with Tomasz. She kept the feelings to herself, not wishing to draw her mother's attention. But as days passed, the changes grew stronger. She felt her appetite grow, she felt sudden moments of dizziness, and once, while standing by the silver trees, she placed her hand on her stomach and felt something strange, almost like a whisper of life. She pulled her hand back quickly, afraid of her own thoughts. The healers had declared long ago that she could never carry a child. Yet her body was telling her something different. One evening, when the city lights shimmered like rivers of glass, Lyra finally decided to call for the family healer. The healer was an elder named Verin, who had cared for the family since Lyra was young. He examined her with the glowing instruments of Vera, scanning her body carefully. His face remained calm, but his hands trembled slightly as he studied the results. When he finished, he looked at her with eyes wide in disbelief. "This is impossible," he whispered. Lyra asked him to explain, her voice shaking. Verin hesitated, then finally said the words that would change her life forever. "You are with child." Lyra gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. Her heart pounded in her chest. The words felt unreal, like a dream too bright to touch. She shook her head, reminding him of the healer's verdict years ago. But Verin showed her the glowing screen, the clear pulse of new life within her. There was no mistake. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then the healer spoke again, almost to himself. "No Verin medicine could have done this. This is beyond our knowledge." He looked at her with both awe and fear. It should not be possible, yet here it is. News spread quickly through the mansion. Servants whispered in the halls. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was unnatural. A few feared it was a sign of great change. Every corner of the house seemed alive with rumors. When Tomasz returned for his next visit, he noticed the heavy atmosphere. Servants glanced at him as if holding back words. Finally, Lyra found him in the garden, her face pale but her eyes bright with a light he had never seen before. She told him what the healer had discovered. Her voice trembled, but her hands were steady as she spoke. Tomasz listened carefully, his face calm yet filled with quiet wonder. He did not laugh or doubt her words. Instead, he said gently, "Life often finds a way where others believe there is none. Humanity has seen this many times. What others call impossible, we sometimes discover as truth." Lyra felt tears rise in her eyes. For so long she had believed herself broken, unworthy of hope. Now she carried hope itself within her. She whispered that she did not understand how this could happen. Tomasz replied that perhaps her body had found a strength no one had seen before, and perhaps his presence had awakened something the healers of Vera could not measure. While Lyra's heart filled with hope, Lady Anura's heart filled with disbelief. When she was told of the healer's discovery, she stormed into the chamber herself. She demanded answers, her gown flowing like fire behind her. Varen bowed low and repeated the truth. Her daughter was carrying life. Lady Anura's voice rose in shock. "This cannot be. You all said she was barren. You all swore it." Her hands shook as she pointed at the glowing screen. "How can this be real?" Her scream echoed through the crystal halls, startling servants and shaking the silence of the mansion. For Lady Anura, it was not only surprise but also fear. Her pride had always rested on the certainty of her people's knowledge. Now that knowledge was broken. She turned to her daughter, her eyes wide and almost desperate. "Who did this? What power touched you?" But Lyra only lowered her gaze and placed her hand gently over her stomach. She did not answer, for the truth was too new, too fragile, to speak aloud. Lady Anura left the chamber in a storm of anger and confusion. Her footsteps rang through the halls. Servants moved aside quickly, afraid of her fury. Alone in her private room, she sat trembling, her thoughts racing. If this was true, then everything she believed about her people's mastery of life was wrong. And if humans had a hand in this miracle, then perhaps humans carried a strength greater than she had ever imagined. Meanwhile, Lyra sat quietly by the garden fountain with Tomasz. The stars above shone bright, and the silver leaves reflected their light. She told him that she was afraid of what was to come, afraid of her mother's reaction and the whispers of the city. But she also admitted she had never felt such joy in her life. Tomasz placed a steady hand over hers. "Hope often comes with fear," he said softly. "But it is still hope. Do not let fear steal it from you." Lyra nodded slowly, her heart steadying with his words. She knew her life would never be the same again. The impossible had become real, and nothing could erase it. In the mansion of crystal towers, a quiet storm had begun. A daughter once thought barren now carried the future within her. A mother who had believed in wealth and power above all else now faced a truth that shattered her pride. And a human, simple in dress but strong in spirit, stood at the center of it all. The impossible sign had appeared, and its light would soon spread beyond the walls of the mansion, across the city, and perhaps even across the stars. The mansion of Lady Anura was never quiet. Servants walked its wide halls, musicians sometimes played soft tunes in the evening, and the hum of crystal machines filled the air with a steady rhythm. But on the day the truth about Lyra was revealed, silence fell heavy upon the household. The silence was not calm. It was tense, like the air before a storm. Lady Anura sat in her chamber, her jeweled hands gripping the armrests of her crystal chair. She could still hear the healer's words in her mind. Her daughter, once declared barren, was with child. The thought twisted inside her like a knot that would not loosen. For years she had lived with the shame that her line would end. She had hidden that sorrow behind wealth and pride. Now she was told it had all changed, yet she could not understand how. Her thoughts raced. Was it truly her daughter's body that had found new strength, or was there something foreign at work, something beyond her control? The name of the human, Tamash, came to her mind, and she felt her stomach tighten. She had noticed his time spent in the garden with Lyra. She had seen the way her daughter's eyes had followed him. Could this simple human have brought about what Varen healers could not? The idea unsettled her deeply. Unable to sit still, Lady Anura rose and swept through the halls. Her gown trailed behind her like a river of fire. Servants bowed quickly as she passed, afraid of her storming presence. She walked until she reached the great hall of the mansion. There, standing under the high arches of glowing crystal, she saw her daughter. Lyra stood near the fountain, her hand resting gently upon her stomach. For a moment, Lady Anura froze. The sight struck her harder than the healer's words. It was no longer an idea spoken aloud but a living truth before her eyes. Her daughter carried life within her. Something broke inside Lady Anura. Her voice rose in a piercing cry, a scream that echoed against the crystal walls. The sound carried through the mansion, reaching every corner, startling servants and guests alike. Lyra turned quickly, her eyes wide with shock. She had never heard her mother scream like this. Fear rose in her chest, but she did not step back. She kept her hand over her stomach, as if protecting the small miracle within her. Lady Anura's face was pale, her eyes wide with both fear and fury. She pointed a trembling finger at her daughter. "How can this be? You were told by every healer that it was impossible. What force has touched you?" Her voice cracked, filled with both disbelief and pride collapsing into dust. Lyra lowered her gaze, her lips pressing tightly together. She wanted to explain, but no words came. The truth was too strange and fragile to put into speech. She only whispered softly, "Mother, it is real." Her calm voice only deepened Lady Anura's storm. She paced back and forth, her gown flashing in the light. "Real? Do you not see what this means? Our knowledge, our healers, our science have always been certain. If they were wrong, then everything we believed in stands on sand. If this is true, then it was not Vera that gave you this gift. It came from somewhere else." Her eyes narrowed. "It came from him." Lyra lifted her head, meeting her mother's sharp gaze. For the first time, her voice carried strength. "Do not speak of him with anger. He has only given me kindness. He brought hope where no one else did." The words struck Lady Anura as if they were arrows. Her daughter, who had always been quiet and obedient, now spoke with a voice that carried defiance. The scream of pride that had filled the hall turned into a silence heavy with meaning. At that moment, Tamash entered the hall. He had heard the scream and rushed to see what had happened. He stopped when he saw the two figures before him, mother and daughter standing apart like two sides of a broken mirror. Lady Anura turned sharply toward him, her eyes flashing. "You," she said, her voice low and filled with accusation. "What have you done? What power do you humans carry that even our healers cannot match?" Tamash did not flinch. His voice remained calm, though his eyes were steady. "I have done nothing unnatural. I have only shared time, words, and care. What has happened is not a trick. It is life finding a way. Lady Anura's hands clenched at her sides. Life finding a way? Do you claim your fragile kind has mastered what ours could not? Tomasz shook his head. Not mastered. Only endured. Humans are not stronger than Varans in body or knowledge. But we endure when others believe there is no path left. Perhaps that is why your daughter now carries life. Perhaps her spirit reached for hope, and hope answered. His words were simple, but they struck deep. Lyra felt tears welling in her eyes, not from sorrow but from the strength in his voice. Lady Anura, however, turned away, unable to accept such an explanation. To her, it felt like a wound to her pride, a challenge to the greatness of her people. The hall remained silent after her scream. Servants stood at the edges, too afraid to speak. They had all heard the echo of their mistress's voice. They had all seen her pride crack before their eyes. In their whispers later, some would say the scream marked the beginning of change, a moment when the mansion of crystal towers no longer stood unshaken. That night, Lady Anura retreated to her chamber. She sat before the tall window that overlooked the city, the towers shining under the stars. She had always believed her wealth and her people's knowledge were unshakable truths. Now she felt them slipping from her hands like sand. Her daughter's future, once so empty, now carried a light that she had not given. In her heart, she wrestled with anger and fear, but beneath them was something even harder to face. A whisper of awe. In another part of the mansion, Lyra lay awake in her room. She placed her hands gently over her stomach and whispered to the life within her. She spoke softly, not in fear but in hope. She did not know what the future held, but she felt stronger than ever before. Tomasz sat quietly in the garden, looking up at the stars. He knew the storm was only beginning. He knew Lady Anura's scream would echo far beyond the walls of the mansion. But he also knew that life had already chosen its path. The impossible had become real, and no voice, no scream, could undo it. The mansion of Lady Anura was no longer the same. The scream she had given in the great hall had spread beyond its walls. Servants carried whispers into the streets, and soon the news reached the towers of Vara. Lyra, the daughter of Lady Anura, once declared barren, was now with child. The news shook the city like an earthquake. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a threat. And many asked the same question: how could this happen? Lady Anura tried to quiet the rumors, but the more she tried, the stronger they became. Leaders from other towers sent messages, demanding answers. Healers came to the mansion asking to see proof with their own eyes. They studied Lyra with their glowing tools and always found the same result. Life was indeed growing inside her. They left with wide eyes and voices filled with disbelief. One evening, Lady Anura gathered a group of respected council members in her hall. She wanted to show them that she still had control. The crystal room was filled with glowing light, and the most powerful voices of Vara stood waiting. At the center of it all stood Lyra, her hands folded calmly before her. Tomasz stood nearby, quiet but steady, as if he knew his presence was necessary. Lady Anura raised her hand and spoke loudly. You all know the news. My daughter carries life. The healers swore she never could, yet here she stands with proof before your eyes. I demand answers. I demand to know what has broken the truth of our science. The council members turned their eyes toward Tomasz. He looked out of place among their jeweled gowns and glowing garments, yet his calm face did not falter. One of the council leaders stepped forward and asked, Human, what have you done? What secret do your people hold that we do not? Tomash bowed his head respectfully, then lifted his voice so all could hear. I have done nothing with trick or device. What you see is not a secret formula or hidden weapon. What you see is the nature of life itself, answering in its own way. I am not a master of medicine. I am only a man who has seen how humans survive when all hope is lost. The hall stirred with murmurs. The council leader pressed him further. Then explain how this barren daughter now carries a child. Do not speak in riddles. We demand truth. Tomash took a slow breath and began to speak. His words were not loud, yet the hall grew silent, for his voice carried weight. Humans are known in the galaxy as fragile. Our bodies are not the strongest, our lives are shorter than many. We bleed easily, and sickness strikes us often. Yet these weaknesses have shaped us. We are forced to adapt, to change, to keep moving forward even when the world pushes against us. Where other species see an ending, we see another path waiting to be found. He stepped closer, his eyes meeting the council members. On Earth, I have seen people declared broken, yet they found ways to heal. I have seen families with nothing rebuild their homes from the dust. I have seen children grow strong even when doctors said they would not live. Humanity is not perfect, but we do not stop. We bend, we adapt, we endure. Lyra listened with her heart racing. She had heard these truths before in their quiet talks, but now he spoke them before all of Vera. His voice filled her with pride, not just for him but for herself, for the life growing within her. Tomash raised his hand gently toward Lyra. Your healers declared her future empty, but humanity does not believe in final endings. Perhaps my presence awakened something within her body that your machines could not measure. Perhaps her spirit, touched by hope, reached out for life. What you see is not a violation of your science but the reminder that life is greater than science. Life finds a way when none should exist. The words struck the council deeply. Some frowned, unwilling to accept them. Others looked uncertain, troubled by the thought that humans carried a gift that Varans did not. Lady Anura herself sat frozen, her eyes locked on Tomash. His calm voice challenged everything she had built her pride upon. One council member finally spoke. If what you say is true, then humanity carries something beyond knowledge. Something no tool can measure. That is both powerful and dangerous. Tomash did not deny it. It is powerful, yes. But it is not dangerous unless met with fear. Humanity does not seek to conquer Vera. We seek to live, to share, to create hope where none should be. If my kind has brought this child into being, then it is not a threat. It is a gift. A future you thought lost has now returned. The hall grew silent. Even Lady Anura could not find words. Her eyes shifted between her daughter and the human. For so long she had carried shame over her daughter's condition. Now, before her stood proof that life had triumphed where her pride had failed. Yet instead of joy, she felt her chest tighten. She wanted to celebrate, but fear of losing control kept her silent. Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady though soft. Mother, Council, I do not fear this. I do not feel broken any longer. I feel alive. What has come to me is not weakness but strength. It is not a curse but a blessing. Her words carried more power than she had ever spoken before. The council members looked at her with new eyes. For the first time, she stood not as the quiet daughter of Lady Anura, but as a woman carrying the future. The meeting ended without a clear answer. The council members left in silence, their minds filled with questions. Some would leave with fear, others with wonder, but none could deny what they had seen. That night, the mansion was quiet again. Lady Anura sat in her chamber, staring at the stars. She wanted to hold onto her pride, yet she felt it slipping. She wanted to control the story, yet it was already beyond her hands. In the garden, Tomasz and Lyra walked together under the silver trees. The air was calm, and the flowers glowed faintly in the night. Lyra looked at him with soft eyes. "When you spoke today, I felt hope stronger than ever. I am not afraid anymore." Tomasz smiled gently. "You should not be. Life has chosen you to carry something greater than fear. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Above them, the stars burned bright. In that moment, the truth of humanity shone not as weakness but as strength. A strength that could not be measured in wealth or crystal towers, but in the simple, unshakable will to endure and to bring light where darkness had once ruled. The city of Vera had always been proud. Its crystal towers reflected the light of the twin suns, and its people believed their knowledge was without flaw. Yet the news of Lyra's child spread across every hall and tower like fire carried by the wind. Some citizens whispered in awe, others in fear. If the daughter of Lady Anura, long declared barren, now carried life, then something had shaken the roots of Veran's certainty. Inside the mansion, Lady Anura struggled with emotions she could not control. Her pride told her to resist, to deny that humanity had any role in her daughter's miracle. But every time she looked at Lyra, standing tall with hope in her eyes, she saw the truth she could not escape. Her daughter, once hidden away in sorrow, now shone brighter than the crystal towers themselves. At the same time, Tomasz's presence in the mansion drew both respect and suspicion. The servants admired his kindness, while some of the visiting council members viewed him with cautious eyes. To them, humans were simple creatures of flesh and short lives. Yet now a human had given what all the wealth of Vera could not. One morning, Lady Anura called Lyra and Tomasz into her chamber. She sat upon her tall crystal chair, her gown shining with threads of gold, yet her face carried no smile. The air was heavy as she spoke. "My daughter," she said slowly, "you stand before me with a gift I once believed impossible. I cannot deny what I see, yet I struggle with what it means. If I accept this, I must also accept that our healers were wrong, and that this human has brought to us what our knowledge could not. Do you understand what this does to our pride, to our place among the towers?" Lyra lifted her head, her voice calm but firm. "Mother, this is not about pride. This is about life. You once believed my future was empty. Now it is full. Should that not bring joy instead of fear?" Her words struck deep. Lady Anura looked at her daughter's eyes, eyes filled not with weakness but with strength she had never seen before. The sight unsettled her, yet it also filled her with something she had not felt in many years. Hope. Tomasz then stepped forward. His voice was gentle, yet steady. "Lady Anura, I do not seek to take honor from your people. I only speak truth. What has happened is not my achievement, nor yours. It is the work of life itself. Humanity's gift is not in wealth or in long years, but in our will to endure. That spirit has touched your daughter, and now she carries the future within her." Lady Anura turned her eyes toward him. For the first time, she did not see him as a fragile outsider. She saw him as something different, something both humble and powerful. She did not answer him, but her silence spoke more than words. Days passed, and the whispers in the city grew louder. Delegates from other towers demanded to meet Lyra. Crowds gathered outside the mansion gates, some in celebration, others in doubt. Songs began to rise in the streets, songs of new beginnings, of hope that could not be measured by wealth alone. Lyra walked among the gardens with Tamash by her side, her hand resting over her stomach. She no longer carried herself with the quiet sorrow of before. She walked with pride, not the pride of crystal wealth, but the pride of one who carried the spark of tomorrow. Servants bowed to her with genuine respect, no longer seeing her as a shadow of her mother, but as a light of her own. One evening, as the sun set in glowing shades of orange and violet, Lady Anura stood upon the balcony of her mansion. She looked down at the city below, where torches and lanterns flickered in the gathering night. She thought of her ancestors, of the long line of wealth and power she had guarded. She thought of the shame she had carried for years, believing her line would end with her daughter. Now she realized that her daughter's future was brighter than her own pride had ever been. She turned as Lyra entered the balcony, Tamash walking behind her. Lady Anura studied them for a long moment, then spoke quietly. Perhaps I was blind. I thought legacy was wealth and pride. I see now that legacy is life. You will carry our line forward, not through my control, but through your own strength. And perhaps, she added, her eyes shifting toward Tamash, through the strange gift of humanity. Lyra's eyes softened with tears. For the first time, her mother had spoken without anger, without shame. She reached out and took her mother's hand. Lady Anura did not pull away. Instead, she allowed the touch, and in that moment the old walls between them began to break. Tamash stood beside them, silent, watching the bond form anew. He knew this moment was greater than himself. Humanity had brought a spark, but it was Lyra and her mother who would carry it forward. The stars rose high in the sky, and the city of crystal towers glowed beneath them. A new story had begun. It was not the story of wealth or power, but the story of life finding its way where no one thought it could. In the years to come, people of Vera would tell of the day Lady Anura screamed in disbelief, and of how that scream gave way to a new legacy. They would speak of Lyra, the daughter once thought barren, who carried hope within her. And they would remember the human who showed them that strength was not always in crystal walls or perfect health, but in the will to endure and the courage to believe in what seemed impossible. Lyra stood tall, her hand on her stomach, her eyes on the stars. She whispered softly, not in sorrow but in joy, "This is only the beginning." And so it was. A new legacy had begun, one that would shape not only the mansion of Lady Anura but the future of Vera itself.